this person doesn't need to be here. Hey, welcome back to the Church Staff Book Club. My name is Jonathan Malm, and I'm here with
Jason Young.
Yes. We are now on chapter 7 of our book, How to Get a Return on Failure by John Maxwell. If you haven't tuned into this podcast before, basically our goal is a book club. Whether you're following along as a church staff, whether you're following along alone, our goal is that we could learn better together by reading a book chapter by chapter. One podcast episode equals one chapter. We go through the whole book. And this has been a good one so far. Jason, you said last week that you're kind of actively navigating this material.
100%. 100%. In fact, fun fact, did you know that this podcast, this book club is more successful than Oprah's book club? I don't know how it's happening, but it's just wildly popular. And so I just figured I'd share that with you and everybody else. One can dream, brother. One can dream.
Okay. I was like, we're not how to get a return on lying. It's how to get a return on failure.
Yeah, no, to your point, I kid. Jonathan and I love doing this, especially like a chapter at a time. And this book, I do feel like I'm living this out as we speak. So it's not just a book. It's a book that I'm like, I feel like I'm doing well with, and then also like navigating. And what's helpful for me, the whole book, really from the title, I've never thought about failure as an investment. And really, when you think about investment, is how do you choose to invest, let's say your finances, right? But how do I choose to use failure? And I think the conversation today, I've never thought about failure from this angle. And I love that he writes not about like, hey, did we fail? Which we've talked about reflecting, right? I think this chapter is a great ask that, well, what kind of failure was it? And he says that not all failures are created equal. And I'm like, I don't know that I've ever thought about it that way. So this will be a fun conversation.
Yeah. This chapter was specifically choosing your failures wisely, or basically like, is it a miss? Is that failure a miss, or is that failure a hit? And I mean, if you think about it in, basketball terms, was that 3-point shot a good risk, meaning you had a good look at the rim and you could have made it? Or was it just you threw it up and it was unlikely to go in, and so that was a bad risk? Or if you think about in investing, was that, penny stock a wise investment that just failed? Or was that you did the research, you did the work to figure out, hey, there's a really good chance this might blow up, this might do well, right? So how do you know if the risk or the failure rather was a good thing or a bad thing? And he gives us 7 criteria to help us evaluate that. The first one being that failure was discovered early, which is an interesting one because it almost felt like it contradicted a later one in the chapter. He talks about the idea that did we acknowledge that, hey, this is just not working, it was a failure, move on quickly? Whereas sometimes we just beat our heads against the wall and we keep going, and we don't acknowledge that it's failure, right? Like, so the idea is realizing it happened early and then switching from it, pivoting from it. But I think about, especially in a church context, this is really hard, and this is maybe something we can talk about. But I think about, every church that has started a Saturday night service, for instance. You start it, and it will inevitably initially be a failure, meaning it's not going to have as many people as a Sunday service, because at least in my context, at least in the Texas context, people are kind of trained to go to church on Sundays. Like, Sunday feels like church day. Maybe it's changing since more churches are doing Saturday night services, but Sunday is church day, Saturday is me day, or whatever you want to call it, right? And so starting a Saturday night service always feels like a failure initially, and you have to build it. You're often having to get new people who would never normally come on a Sunday night or a Sunday morning service and get them to come on a Saturday. So at what point do you acknowledge something as a failure early, or at what point do you have to just invest the stamina into building something? What do you think about that, Jason?
Well, I mean, part of it is, are you only focused on evaluating the outcome, and or are you focused on evaluating the decisions that you're making along the way? And I think that's one thing that Maxwell talks about is, hey, outcome does matter, and intent, preparation, learning, those things matter too. And so
Uh-huh.
I might respond, and maybe we'll get to this, well, what are the qualifications or the descriptions of a good miss? If I've done A, B, C, and D, again, which is the part before the outcome, it kind of qualifies if it's a good or a bad miss, if you will.
Yeah.
And so, when I think about a Saturday night service, part of it is I've seen churches make effective decisions versus others that made a rushed decision because, well, it's what I want, or it feels good, or we want to
Mhm.
be known for this. Like the
Or
intent,
it's
again,
what the
going back
church
to
down the street does. That's what the
100%.
church that we're copying does, and
That's
they do
right.
Saturday night service, so we need to do a Saturday night service.
Yeah. Yeah. So it comes back to like, okay, well, what's our intent? Maybe motive, right? Prep. Are we learning along the way? I think there's like all of these things that are almost like backstage.
Mhm.
And the Saturday night service is what's on stage, right? But I
Yeah.
think sometimes like what's going on behind the curtain or backstage that also needs to be evaluated. So when we do evaluate on stage, i.e., the Saturday night service, we're evaluating it appropriately. There's a
Mhm.
local church, a friend of mine, Jason Britt, Bethlehem Church. They do a Thursday night service.
Hmm. It's
So
usually Wednesday and Sunday, those are the 2 options, right? Like
no,
or
they
Sat
do.
and then Saturday is added on.
Yeah, they do Thursday night. And so can you imagine getting moving, a good chunk of people in a brand new building that's already hitting capacity from Sunday to Thursday, and you're running like really, really great numbers. And so it's like, okay, well, the work they did behind the curtain, behind the scenes allows them to better evaluate if it's effective or not because of other elements. So I think part of it is what have we done before we actually made the decision to do the thing? I
Well, and
think
that's
those
interesting because
matter.
we talk about, you talked about the idea of the other elements to it. So
Mhm.
one of those elements probably being volunteer energy or
Yeah.
even staff energy for that matter.
Yeah.
So
Oh, yeah.
I could see a Thursday night service being effective because yeah, like if I'm volunteering on Saturday night and then attending on Sunday, it feels kind of like a marathon of like
Mm.
2 days out of my weekend. Whereas a Thursday, I could serve on a Thursday, attend on a Sunday.
Mhm.
That's more doable. The same thing for staff, like we can do a Thursday night, we can kind of recover, we can kind of get some space in between that, where a lot of churches will do like 5, 6, 7 services on a Saturday, Sunday, and it's just exhausting. So that's a really good point. The idea is, are you evaluating not just the outcome, but the other metrics of, that are important to your church, which would be volunteer energy, staff energy. Are people actually like wanting this? Is this meeting a need that people have? That's a really good point.
Yeah. So I just think, and I've been guilty of this, Jonathan. Sometimes we evaluate only the outcome, and that could be good or bad. It could be a good or bad miss,
Yeah.
right? And he writes about this in the chapter. And I think, okay, that's a part. But the other part is there are other things we should evaluate that are more around our decisions that happened before the thing, whatever the
Yeah.
thing is, that we also need to make sure that we spend time on, because that helps to qualify if it's a good miss or not. Did we prep? Did we show up with wisdom? Was the risk appropriate? Does the thing, whatever the thing is, does it help move the mission forward?
Yeah.
Things of that nature. So again, measuring, we have to be careful on what we measure, because
Yeah.
sometimes we measure the thing that makes us look good when there's some work that we should do before that should inform whether we actually do the thing or not.
Yeah. And that will indicate whether or not it's a good failure. But another thing in this section of the chapter, he talks about the idea of, kind of cutting your losses quickly if
Mm,
this something is a failure. And one
yeah.
of the things that I tend to be guilty of, and I know that people in churches are guilty of this, is becoming emotionally attached to
Yeah.
the thing. So especially
Yeah.
you think about a Saturday night service, maybe you have that one person, they're a server and they can't come on Sundays because they're always going to be working on a Sunday, and
Mhm.
they're the one person that the Saturday night service is working for, and
Mhm.
you come my issue is I become emotionally attached to, like, I'm a very loyal person. So, like,
Mhm.
lately I'm finding I need to, like, fire someone, an employee, but someone that is, doing work for me, and, like, I've had a kind of a long-standing relationship with them, but, like, it's clear that, like, there have been bad things that have happened, and
Mm,
we've talked about the things that need to change, they don't change. My emotional attachment is I need to, like, I don't wanna I don't wanna do that, I don't wanna fire this person, I don't wanna, like, let them go because they're a person. And I'm realizing that I've let it go beyond this being a good failure. Like, I've become too emotionally attached to, which obviously I'm not going to be a jerk whenever I say, "Hey, this isn't working out." Like, obviously I'm not gonna, like, I'm gonna, you know, do it responsibly, do it kindly, do it ethically, but I need to cut my losses here and make a change. And I think
yeah,
so often we do that in churches where we again beat our heads against the wall trying to make something happen because we're emotionally attached to it. Maybe it's pastor's pet project or your pet project, or maybe it's that one person that, like, man, we we want to serve them. How can we serve this person that is not getting served properly, right? But it's only one person, and we have to think about the 20 volunteers that we're burning out in the process, right?
yep.
Uh, it's hard to do.
It is hard to do, and I guarantee you somebody's watching or listening right now that you are either on the brink of making this decision, you are living in the middle of that decision, or you've just had to change plans because you made that type of decision. And so we probably have all three people listening or watching right now, and you're like, oh, if I could be on the podcast with you, I would tell you blank.
Yeah,
And this is real. And so I think this chapter lays out, like, are there some things that we can learn if you're on the front side of it, if you're in the middle of it, and if you're on the back side of it? Because think about the decision that you just illustrated. Like, take the service, for example, since you started with that. If we did it, maybe we didn't do all of our prep work appropriately for it, and we didn't measure the risk, and now we burned out maybe staff or volunteers, or numbers dwindled. It started fine. Now, you know, and we're gonna have to make the decision to pull the plug, and you're thinking, man, the people it's gonna impact, and, like, you
yeah.
feel the weight of that as the decision maker. How can we navigate that? So again, the chapter's interesting on good misses and bad misses. And, and just a second ago, I was talking about, like, good misses and bad misses. When you think about it, it's like, okay, we're ignoring feedback, or we're repeating avoidable mistakes. You don't listen to, the counsel around you. You don't have people check your thinking. You're cutting corners. Maybe you just refuse accountability. Maybe you're like, I don't want to learn. And nobody just says that, but maybe the way you're showing up is that. And so it's paying attention to all of these elements that could be happening behind the curtain that are
Yeah.
really important, that set up this good or bad miss and what you should do on the other side of it.
The second one, focus on benefits of failure, is kind of what we've been talking about for the last 6 weeks. So even John glossed over that section in the chapter, so we can skip that one. But the third one is the idea of learning from failure. And he gave
Yeah.
this, it was like a poem or a little short story about a guy
Yeah.
who's walking down a street. He falls in a hole, and he's like, "Oh no, I fell in a hole. It's not my fault. Took me a while to get out. I got out." Next day, walk down that same street, falls in a hole. "Oh no, I fell in a hole. It's not my fault. Takes me a while to get out." Third day, notices the hole, still falls in the hole. Maybe this is my fault that I'm in here. Gets out. Next day, sees the hole, goes around the hole. Next day, just takes a different street, right? The idea is, like, are we learning from failure? And so the idea is
Mm.
you keep failing,
Mhm.
you keep going, but then you make sure that you tweak the thing that is causing the consistent failure.
Mhm.
So the idea is, if you're starting this ministry, all of them fail. At some point, you have to look for that common denominator. Like, what
Mm.
is what is the thing that we're doing wrong? A lot of times we look at, like, okay, men's ministry didn't work out, or entrepreneurs ministry didn't work out, and we think of those as separate entities, realizing maybe they're all the same root problem, and we have to learn from what those failures were. When we talked about this a little bit last week, that sometimes we learn the wrong lessons from failure.
Mm.
That we learn, like, I learned last week, I was talking about that I learned that podcasts don't work, and that's not true. Like, there's so many podcasts that work, right? And so I had to change my perspective on what was failing whenever I tried to start podcasts or whenever I tried to start things that weren't working. A
Mhm.
lot of that was just longevity. There is this reality, and again, this where it kind of feels like it contradicts a little bit that first part is that there's this reality of you just sometimes have to build.
Mm.
Even John talked about the idea. He it was like his 12th book that finally became a bestseller. He talked about this last week, and you could think that if the outcome you're looking for is bestseller status, and you're writing a bunch of books, are you just continually failing at the same thing? Is writing the books the problem?
Mm.
No, writing the books wasn't the problem. He needed to keep going through that. So that's where there's this really tough tension I feel like between cutting our losses but staying faithful to what we believe is true. And that's a tough thing. I feel like there's a lot of instinct involved in that. Obviously, it should be a lot of prayer involved in that. As believers, we believe that God can guide us, but it's a tough thing, and I do feel like a lot of it is instinct.
Yeah. It feels like there's this invisible line. If you're listening, watching right now, you're like, "Okay, like, tell me what is the thing to notice or the decision-making moment," and, like, I wish we could.
Yeah.
I think it sounds so cliche, but you just said it. It is praying, but maybe more specific, it's like, in this moment, like, "Jesus, where are you? What do you want me to know?
Mhm.
What do you want me to do?"
Because
Because
that's the truth
sometime
about failure is that oftentimes in our walk with God, it's not about the outcome. It's about who God's forming us to be, and that's frustrating because we're
it
outcomes oriented people.
that's right, and there's a lot of image-related elements here, like, we don't want to we attach failure to identity,
Mhm.
not behavior or circumstances or decisions or whatever. So it's like, I'm a failure versus
Yeah.
we tried the Saturday night service and it failed because X, Y, and Z, right? Part of it is we just need the reps.
Yeah.
Just this attempt. I love, and again, everybody's probably heard that Michael Jordan, I missed more than 9,000 shots in my career. I've lost almost 300 games. 26 times I've been trusted to take the game winning shot and missed. I failed over and over again in my life, and that is why I succeed. He got rep after rep after
Yeah.
rep. And sometimes I don't know that if and he had courage to get the reps, right? Now,
Yeah.
again, his context is a little different if you're a church leader right now, but sometimes it is just kind of like we get the reps. And sometimes we take so long to think about something. People can be risk averse,
Yeah.
um, and they don't, so they don't get the reps or they don't make adjustments, in the reps, right? And I think
Yeah.
that is part of it. But I can imagine somebody is trying to figure out, well, golly, I don't know, do I cut the loss now? Should I wait 4 more weeks? Like,
Yeah.
I mean, when I was on church staff, that's what I struggled with. Because, like, I just want to cut it and move on. But then I'm like, well, wait a
Yeah.
minute. What if we just need like 4 more weeks and like
You
we'll
have the
we'll
two
turn
two
this thing
sides of the
around?
spectrum, right? The people that are, like, just hopelessly optimistic where it's 5
Yeah.
years down the road and, like, "You should have cut that 4 years
That's
ago,"
right.
or
That's
the
right.
people that are like, "We tried it 1 week and we're done." We're like, "We're moving on to the next
Yeah.
thing," right? And
Yeah.
there's a balance there somewhere.
Yeah. I agree.
And I think, we talked about there's no, like, magic dividing line on knowing whether or not to cut our losses, but there is a
Mm,
really helpful the 4th section of this chapter I thought was very helpful. The
yeah.
idea is you fail in your area of strength.
Mm.
So, for instance, what would be something that I'm bad at? I generally feel like I'm good at a lot of things, so I don't like he talked about the idea that, he was a pastor.
Yeah.
I have confidence where I'm like I think that is part of failure is like being just confident that like he tells the story about a kid who's like, he's swinging at a pitch and he's like, I'm the best batter in the world. And he misses his first, he throws the ball up, he swings at it, misses it. And he's like, don't worry, I don't need 2 more strikes. I'm the best batter in the world. Throws it up, misses again. Third one, throws it up, misses again. And then his mom's like, are you still the best bat in the world? He's like, no, it doesn't matter now. I'm the best pitcher in the world, right? Like, so the idea is I have a little bit of that confidence where you just kind of like, you just keep going and you're like, I can still do this, right? But John talks about in the chapter that, he was a pastor. He's like, I was bad at pastoral care, like counseling, which is kind of rough. Like that's kind of the counsel, when I think of a pastor, I don't necessarily think of a speaker. I think of someone who's pastoring people, right? But he's like, I was bad at care, at this like counseling element specifically. And he's like, I was maybe a 2 out of 10 at that, right? Public speaking, I was maybe a 5 or 6 out of 10. And so he's like, at some point, I had to realize I need someone else to be doing the counseling because I am failing at this. And he makes the point that normally in our lives, we can add 1 or 2 or 3 points if we work really hard at that thing on a 10-point scale, right? So at best, he was going to get to a 4 or 5 at counseling. But in his public speaking, he was going to get to be a 7 or an 8, which was really a great opportunity. So I think that can be some of the dividing line for us is, are we trying to do something that we are just naturally bad at and we might
Mm,
eventually get good at, but we're never going to be excellent at?
mhm,
So, I mean, I think there's realities of this for churches. I think churches have a natural aptitude. It's based on the way that the team works together, the pastors, leadership, the everyone's different skills, everyone's different aptitudes. All of that kind of coalesces, almost creates a corpus, a body that is
mhm,
naturally good at some things, naturally bad at other things. And I think a lot of times we start initiatives in churches. We should do this. Like, this is something churches are supposed to do, but we're a 2 at it. And so we beat
mm,
our heads against it trying to become a 4 or 5 at best, whenever the thing that we are a 5, 6, or 7 at already, we should be putting more effort into to become a 9 or a 10 at. And
mhm.
that's a hard thing, especially for a congregation to say like, "Hey, we don't do this XYZ thing that you think is vital to ministry because we're just not naturally not good at that." And I don't know, I mean, maybe I'm wrong about this. Maybe this is one of those things where we should be, fully creating this full approach to ministry. I don't know. I don't know what you think about that.
It reminds me of, like, the church who feels like they need to offer everything for everyone.
Mhm.
And then there's this frustration that everybody feels overwhelmed or we're not doing most of the things well anymore
Yeah.
or never were. And so I think there is this approach with caution that pausing long enough to clarify what do we do really well, and you say,
Mhm.
well, how do you measure that? I mean, think about like what gives energy and
I
you
think you just
celebrate the
notice it.
most.
If you're just honest with yourselves, you see like
Yeah,
this is just what people love about us.
yeah, and that you think about impact and influence and just seems to be like natural momentum for and then you think
Yeah.
about the other things that feel like a drag or and if you're not careful, again, people have heard this before, many people have experienced this before. If you're not careful, the things that kind of like drag extra weight, then you're like, oh no, we got to put more into it.
Yeah.
Eventually, if you're not careful, eclipse the things that you are great at or that do have remarkable impact. And so then you feel guilty because, well, if we stop doing that or if we don't start that, then blank, right?
Yeah.
And so there is this approach with caution that you can't just start everything. And I think we
Yeah.
intellectually know that, but we emotionally, and then we have this spiritual burden on ourselves
Yeah.
that will church, we're in the people business, we have to do. But making those decisions, if you're not careful, I can almost guarantee you is going to shrink the impact of the other things that you are good at doing in due time.
I think I think one of the liberating factors in this for churches is getting over the competitive nature
Mm,
that we have to keep people. Uh, the reality is there are some churches, there are needs in our congregation that we will not be able to meet effectively. And there are churches in our community that will be able to meet that need effectively. And sometimes we have to be okay with the idea that like this person doesn't need to be here. Not in a heartless way, but in a way that we don't need to try to hold on to them so much by making sure they have what they need so they can stay here. I think one of the most liberating ideas is just saying, hey, we have churches in town that are our friends, that we love them. These are great places to go. And not that we're trying to separate you from your community to go there, but sometimes maybe you need to go there for this specific thing that you need and still can stay connected to our body. Or maybe that's just where you need to go as a family, right? Like,
mm.
I think that's part of the liberating things for churches that we need to kind of remember that like we are all doing this together. We are not
Yeah,
competitive
but
in this.
that is not the
We don't see
primary.
it as competition, but we feel it instead like it becomes like we hold on to people And it is a
Yeah.
competitive because we don't want them to go over there. We don't want them to leave us.
Well, and the other thing is if people leave us, we feel that's an indictment on us. If
Yeah.
people leave us, maybe that's money going away from us. So there is this aspect. Same with if you leave volunteers. Sometimes we don't make decisions. Forget the whole church. Just if you lead a group of volunteers, we don't make decision because we're afraid maybe a volunteer or 2 or 3 or 10 will leave.
Yeah.
Um, and so we have to be careful. There's a little bit when I think about this conversation, you said this a second ago, it reminded me. I'm not saying people are codependent, but when you really look at the practical definition of codependency is if you're not
Mm.
okay, I'm not okay, but if you're okay, I'm okay.
Yeah.
Right? And so I kind of feed off of, and so it's being very careful of not building a codependent ministry and, as it relates to other people and just
Yeah.
being mindful, like, is your ministry, and this sounds so cliche, but is it, has the Lord led you to do X? Has the Lord
Yeah.
clarified you to do X? Have you made the right decisions behind the curtain to do X, right? Versus making it solely, well, if they're okay, then I'm okay, and if not, then I'm not,
Mhm.
and it's just this, approach with caution when you think about, you know, this area of strength, area of weakness, approach with caution, because I know he then navigates us into, the 5th learning lesson, like making adjustments,
Yeah.
and it could come mid-game. It could come, post game when you reflect, but what are the adjustments that, you know, you need to make in order to maximize the opportunity or relationships or whatever it is? It's just making those adjustments along the way. What are the levers or turning the dials, whatever it might look like, in order to potentially set you up and others for the best possible outcome? Is that
And I
what do
think
you is that
I think one
accurate?
of those yeah, I think one of those adjustments, and it really marries 4 and 5 well, is that as a leader, often we put people in roles that they shouldn't be in.
Oh, yeah.
We I think about this all the time. I had a friend who was this phenomenal graphic designer, incredible, and he was moved into a leadership role, and he just is not a leader. Like, he's a 2 at leadership, right? And they were trying to get him to do this ministry as a lead to lead this ministry, and it was always pulling teeth, both for my friend and both for his leader, right? And so a lot of times I think we have these people, these are the resources we have, and then these are the things we think we need to do, and they don't line up. And so we're
Mm,
just trying to like shove people into places that they don't belong.
yeah.
And instead of saying these are the people we have, these are the things we can do well, maybe we should focus on excelling at those things. And then that thing that we think needs to happen, maybe it needs to wait for 2 years until
Mm.
we find the right person, until we have that right resource, and we make adjustments to people. But again, I see so many times churches just shuffling the same people into different ministries, hoping they'll find the right mixture that will make what they want and what they have work together, and it just doesn't happen.
And one thing I'll add to that, I see this in church and corporate side. Just because you're a good individual contributor doesn't mean you will be a good leader.
Mhm. Yeah, 100%.
And so sometimes we're like, oh, they're good at that
Good
craft.
doers do not mean good leaders.
No, it doesn't. You're good at that craft. And we're like, oh, well, since they're good at the craft, I'll move them into, this leadership role. And then when it's not going as you thought it would go, or they're struggling, you're
Mm,
like, what's going on? Like, what's your problem? And it may not be them. It may be the
yeah,
fact that you made a decision that wasn't a good decision. And so it is slowing down just a little bit to evaluate, moving an individual contributor to a leader. And then the next thing to evaluate is moving the leader into a leader of leaders. And
yeah,
those are things just to evaluate as the leader when you make those decisions. That's why leadership is heavy. Leadership can be hard. But one thing that Jonathan and I both know is yes, leadership is hard. You want to get it right. And so one
yeah,
thing we hope is that this podcast conversation is a way that can help you increase your moments of being right or making the right decisions.
yeah. We didn't get a chance to cover the last 2, a failure we correct, positive action after failure. Honestly, again, this book feels a lot of like reiterating the same ideas, and I feel like those 2 were. it is a good book. It is very repetitive. It maybe could have been a long email. I don't know, but I do like this book.
That's
That's a hit
funny.
on the book. It's a really good book, but it's one of those like it reinforces the things multiple times. But hey, we hope you found this episode helpful. Whether or not you're following along with us in the book or whether or not you're just tuning into the podcast, we hope you get a lot from this. But if you haven't subscribed yet, be sure to subscribe, follow us on social media, but we'll see you again next week.